Well, he's barely a week old in office, but Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari says Nigeria's army will take a bigger role in the efforts to crush Boko Haram by taking over from soldiers from Niger in occupying towns liberated from the Islamist militant group. Niger and Chad played a leading role earlier this year in driving the insurgents from towns in northeastern Nigeria, including Malam Fatori and Damasak, in part because of the weakness of the Nigerian army at the time. The president was speaking during a visit to Niger that is his first trip overseas since winning the elections in March in Nigeria, which has the biggest population and economy in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, thankfully, we've been able to connect with Mohammed Sharif, who is the Middle East and North Africa Programs Coordinator for the Committee to Protect Journalists. Mr. Sharif, thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me. My name is actually Sharif Mansour.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Sharif Mansour. Please,
Yes.
there must have been a mix-up there. I do apologize. Well, Mr. Sharif Mansour joins us from New York. Now we're discussing what's happening with the retrial of the Al Jazeera journalists. Now, I'd like to ask you what more organizations like yours can do to help them in this case.
Well, we've so far did our best in promoting and documenting the case from day one. And I think for this case specifically, there is a lot of attention in the local, regional, and international media, but also a lot of attention from policymakers around the world. We, as an NGO, have limited resources, and what we try is to focus on emblematic cases. And this was an emblematic cases for us because, for the first time, the Egyptian government have used terrorism-related charges in order to go under defendant, and it was important to make this case much known outside the Egyptian community and even abroad in the international community, because it will have consequences on other cases, including more than a dozen of Egyptian journalists that are currently behind bar. Also, it has consequences because a lot of neighboring countries, including countries like Jordan and in the Gulf area, have recently made legislations that expanded the definition of terrorism and for the first time allow the government in certain cases to bring journalists in criminal court because they were accused of aiding, promoting terrorism. So there is a trend that we want to see reversed, and Egypt, with its influence in the area, could set a very bad precedent if there was an indictment at the end of the road for this trial.
Now, Mr. Mansour, I'd just like to round up by asking you what lessons we can learn as journalists from cases like this.
Well, there is a lot of discussion happening right now about this case. Some of it has to do with the internal dynamic between the journalists on the case and the media outlet, Al Jazeera. And there is a debate about how much Al Jazeera have been able to support its journalists. It's led mainly by Mohammed Fahmi's recent writings and statements about the specifics of the discussions he had with his employer. And this is something that I think is important to have in the public debate, because we, as a press freedom organization, we want to make sure that employers worldwide are doing the best they can in order to mitigate risks and ensure that their journalists are ready and able to work safely. So we and other press freedom groups have launched an initiative in February that Al Jazeera has signed into, and more than 60 other media outlets and unions, journalist groups around the world, that tries to at least uh, set some principles that media outlets and journalists, including freelance journalists, will abide to in order to reduce the risks and ensure that the journalists are better prepared and equipped in conflict environment.
Almost
Also,
done.
in terms of the actual case and how it manifests itself, is that yes, there could be a lot of things to say about how the journalists were operating, and in some cases, maybe there was legal case against Al Jazeera and some requirements by the Egyptian government against Al Jazeera in terms of registrations, but we should never put the blame on the journalist when it has to do with a press freedom um, issue. This Al Jazeera was prevented in Egypt because of their coverage, because of their work, because they have a critical view of the Egyptian government, and the Egyptian government have no right to decide what kind of coverage they should get. They have no right to ask any media outlet or any journalist to cover events the way they like. So we should never kind of like focus only on the internal dynamic, but focus on the bigger picture here, which is
Well said.
the Egyptian government's attempt
Indeed.
to,
Mr. Sharif Mansour,
yeah,
we're very grateful. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you
Miss-
for having me.
Yes, Mr. Sharif Mansour is the North Africa Programs Coordinator with the Committee for the Protection of Journalists. Now, despite what's happening in Egypt, we're looking at some good developments there. Power generation is a major issue in various African countries, just like right here in Nigeria, South Africa, and even parts of Egypt. Now, for Egypt, they're looking to solve the challenge by turning their attention to solar energy. Only 1% of the country's energy needs are powered by renewable energy, with Egypt relying heavily on gas and oil fuel. But now, Egypt's leadership is throwing its weight behind a combination of efforts to boost renewable energy generation.
The government has announced a string of plans, including the construction of solar and wind power plants, to add a combined capacity of 4.3 megawatt hours of the country's grid, and the introduction of a new feed-in tariff system aimed at encouraging private investment. As the summer heat approaches and Egypt worries, it faces more power outages like those that last year hit the country as often as twice a day. The government has announced it wants to cut reliance on natural gas and fuel oil from 90% to 62% by 2020. Even though this diversification push may include adding coal to the country's energy mix, a flurry of renewable energy startups say this could be their window of opportunity. Only last month, Access Power said it had agreed a deal with Egypt's government to build a 65-megawatt solar power plant and was in talks for a wind power scheme in a North African country which will generate 50 megawatts of power. At an event on Monday, June the 1st in the country's capital, Cairo, Egyptian Vice Chairman of Renewable Energy Authority for Studies and Technical Affairs, Omnaya Sabri, spoke about the country's solar projects.
The solar projects, we have about 80 megawatt, 20 megawatt each in different areas in Egypt. And those projects were financed by in cooperation with international financial institutions.
During the event, the Swiss ambassador Markus Lettner encouraged Egypt to look at the plane's technology to help power in its economy.
An idea born in Switzerland, an idea that combines innovation, environmental protection, and the spirit of pioneering and exploring. Solar Impulse is a Swiss airplane that is currently flying around the world, powered only by the sun, with no fuel or polluting emissions. Solar Impulse is a powerful symbol of innovation, an indication that what we can achieve when we believe in the impossible, an inspiration to put technical innovation at the heart of economic development.
10,000 solar cells built into wings took off from Abu Dhabi in March. The plane, which left Nanjing, China on Sunday, May the 31st, had been expected to fly over Japan and head across the Pacific Ocean to Hawaii.
Well, we end the program on a historical note. Mauritius has appointed Amina Gurib Fakim as its first female president after her predecessor stepped down from the ceremonial position last week. The opposition also supported her appointment, making the vote a mere formality. Well, big congratulations to her. We'd like to hear from you right here on Network Africa. Feel free to reach out to us either via email or Twitter. The address and handle will appear on your screen in just a moment. And we're waiting for it to appear. And there it is. Feel free to send us your comments or questions either via email or Twitter. The address and handle are right there on your screen. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. As always, it's been a pleasure. I'm Cynthia Are.